Paranormal King Radio Network, bringing you the best paranormal hosts and guests. Bringing you the best paranormal shows and features. Playing the top musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. With the best paranormal hosts and guests. The best in paranormal shows and features. Playing the best musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same.
There are things in this world of the paranormal that we do not understand, but we try to explain it through methods of science, magic, religion, and historical accounts. What we present to you now is Haunted Salem's Beyond the Grave, where the dead educate the living.
For centuries, folk tales about vampires, werewolves, zombies, and the undead have captivated and spooked children all over the world, ranging from well-known cases such as Bram Stoker's Dracula to historical cases such as human blood-drinking Elizabeth Bathory, even to Slavic werewolves. Vampires, werewolves, and zombies bring together the most exciting and ghoulish of all the characters. Here, on Beyond the Grave Radio, you will learn all about vampires, werewolves, and zombies, and how it relates today in our world. Welcome to Beyond the Grave Radio with Haunted Salem, where the dead educate the living here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. I am your host, Christina Corsetti, and tonight's show is all about vampires, werewolves, and zombies. There are literally thousands of vampire legends throughout history. Nearly every single culture on the face of Earth has some kind of myth about undead, blood-sucking creatures that relate back to vampire mythology. Naturally, the legends are not all consistent with one another, though there are many common threads throughout the various cultural myths. Our first question would be, though, do real vampires exist? There have been reports from all over the world, thousands of years of creatures like these. If vampires don't exist, then how do you explain all these sightings and encounters? A hoax is one thing, but the same hoax being played over and over again for thousands of years across independent cultures is entirely different. We have reasons to believe that they might exist because of these reports, but we have reason to be skeptical because we don't have the proof we so badly desire. Keep in mind, too, that if you were to encounter a vampire, you probably would not live to tell about it. Not only are vampires hungry for human blood, but they live by a code that requires their existence to remain secret, only making detection that much more difficult. Despite being one of the oldest and most prevalent creatures of world mythology, the origins of vampires have remained unknown for thousands of years. It wasn't until the scriptures of Delphi were found that we're only given a glimpse into the early vampire history. Only a vampire can create another vampire, so logic tells us that history of vampires begin with a single vampire who created the others, much like the chicken and the egg argument, which came first. We had little insight into how the first vampire came about until recently. Logically, if there was no vampire to make the first vampire, how was the first vampire made? Well, the answer lies in the scriptures of Delphi, especially in the collection of writings known as the Vampire Bible. The first vampire started out as not a vampire at all, but as a human man named Ambrogio. He was an Italian-born adventurer whose fate began to Delphi in Greece, but in a nutshell, a series of blessings and curses transformed this young man into history's first vampire. Especially, it began with the son of god Apollo, who was in a fit of rage cursed Ambrogio. He basically, his skin was burnt, should never be touched by sunlight again. Bad luck followed him when he ended up gambling away his soul to Hades, the god of the underworld. The next curse came through Apollo's sister, Artemis, the goddess of the moon and hunting, who made it so that Ambrogio's skin was burnt if he ever touched silver. The blessings came soon after when Artemis, taking pity on the poor young man, gave him a gift of immortality. He could carry his curses, his skin burning by sunlight or silver, but he could live forever in his current form. Not only that, but she also gave him the speed and strength to become a hunter whose skills were second only to her own. Bloodsucking is also included in this blessing. In the vampire origin story, Ambrogio hunts swans and uses their blood as ink to write love poems to his lady Selene. While this may be considered a little creepy by our standards, it was all that unusual in ancient Greece to make do with what you hunted. Ambrogio later moved back to Italy, now as a full-fledged vampire. Legend traces him to the city of Florence, where he creates the first vampire clan. We don't know a whole lot about this clan, other than that they most likely willing volunteers, humans who wanted power and immortality and were willing to trade their souls for it. It was believed that the curse would continue for any vampire, where their souls would remain in the underworld, where they could return to claim them but never could leave. From what we know of the history of vampires, the clan grew in size and strength, until infighting created something of a civil war within the clan, and many vampires left to form their own clans. What happened to Ambrogio and those who stayed with him is largely unknown, though many believe he still resides somewhere in Florence. Vampire cults have existed for several years, but the majority of these cults were filled with members who display vampire-like activity, such as drinking human blood and hiding from sunlight. These cult members are, however, distinctly human, simply mimicking the behavior of vampires, as this was, until recently, the closest a human could get to vampirism. The details of how to become a real vampire have only recently come to light. Many of the ancient myths appear to be true, but others are still in question. The Vampire Bible, in it, ancient scribes describe the only known way that a human can become a vampire as the following expert from the book details, and it takes more than just a bite to become a vampire. It says in the book, the ritual begins with a bite from a vampire to human, where he may consume her blood. As she lays bleeding, her pulse moves inside him, and they become one, and she must then drink of their joined blood, the first bite as vampire, the last as human. This description portrays a ritual that is consistent with earlier legends of vampires, where the human host must drink the blood of the vampire in order to transform. So, you want to know how to kill a vampire? There are only 6 known ways to kill a vampire. First, the easiest way to kill a vampire is directly through sunlight. Even before the first vampire became a vampire, he was cursed to forever, had to hide from the sun. Any skin of the vampire that comes in contact with direct sunlight will be severely burned. If you can somehow trick or trap a vampire in a place where they will eventually expose to direct sunlight, you're golden. The problem with this plan is that vampires are very fast, very strong, and generally very smart. They aren't going to simply let you stick them in place where they don't want to be and stay there. The nice part about sunlight is it shows up daily. If you can survive through the night and make it somewhere where you can see the sun, you're probably safe. The problem is this usually means that you have to be outside prior to the sun rising, which pretty much just makes you a prime target for a hungry vampire. Still, you can, if you can wait it out the night until the morning, find the brightest path to safety and move quickly. Next, still a classic, the wooden stake remains one of the best tools to use for vampire killing. Really, all a wooden stake is a piece of wood with one edge sharp enough to pierce human flesh. If you think of monsters in terms of sports, vampires are very great offensive players who can always score, but they are pretty crappy defenders. Sure, their speed and strength give them a big advantage, but the truth about vampires is they are used to overpowering their opponent with their offensive capabilities that very few spent much time learning to defend themselves. Knowing this, the key to killing a vampire using a wooden stake is to strike first. Yes, that means playing offensive against the offensive powerhouse, but in this game of life and death, you only need to score once. The vampire can heal from most injuries, but a wooden stake through the heart is not one of them. Though they heal quickly, their skin and bones are just as fragile as any human, so the key to killing them is to make it so they can heal. Again, the curse of silver begins before the first vampire became a vampire, when the goddess Artemis cursed the first vampire so his skin would burn when it touched silver. Well, using silver is a bit like a blend between sunlight and a wooden stake. It doesn't work as well as either of those two options, but it is an advantage on its own. First of all, unlike sunlight, silver is highly portable. You can carry an item of solid silver with you easily. Secondly, it won't kill a vampire to stab it in the heart with silver, but it will slow down the healing process, which can be very helpful. In order to actually kill a vampire using silver, you'd probably need a lot of it. Silver is more helpful as a slowing or a trapping agent. Vampires, despite their strength, cannot break a chain of silver even if they tried. If you could somehow manage to handcuff the vampire to a tree, say using silver handcuffs, all you'd have to do is wait until the sun rose the next day and you'd have yourself a fried vampire. Next, fire seems like an easy fix to your vampire problems. But there is a problem. Yes, it will burn vampires just like it burns humans. But unlike sunlight and silver, it only is through natural means that a vampire will burn by fire. What I mean is, the reason sunlight and silver burn a vampire and cause its healing process to slow dramatically is because vampires are inherently cursed by these two elements. While fire can burn just as well as sunlight or silver, it does nothing to slow the healing process of the vampire, because vampires are not cursed with a weakness to fire. If you're going to use fire to kill a vampire, you're going to need a big fire and have the vampire stuck in it for a long time. Probably say an hour to be safe. Though about a half an hour it will usually do the trick. This is because the vampire heals as it burns. The hotter the fire, the faster it burns. But you'll still basically trying to beat the speed of the vampire's healing process should the vampire be mostly burnt, then escape the fire and it can still survive.
Tearing the vampire's head off is not easy as it might sound. Though their bones and their flesh is as fragile as ours, they have strong neck muscles, which can make it difficult to task and achieve. If you're really intent on moving a vampire's head, there are two good ways to do it. The first option is to use a silver knife and cut the head off. This will still likely be a bit of a chore, but the silver will stop the healing process and slowly wear down the muscles' strength, so it will enough patience and time. This will work. The second option is to have another vampire tear the head off of your vampire of choice. Vampires are built strong enough to tear each other's heads off fairly easily, though it's highly looked down upon for a vampire to kill another vampire, so convincing one to do this is not going to be easy. The final method of our list of how to kill a vampire is using vampire disease. Most of the time when someone talks about vampire disease, they are referring to porphyric hemophilia, which is a disease that, introduced to human bloodstream, will eventually turn that human into a vampire. Porphyric hemophilia is caused by a bacteria called carried in all vampires, which can be transferred to the human through blood or saliva. The other vampire disease refers to the condition known as sag deboliza, which translates to blood weakness in Italian. No one really knows what it is or how it's spread, but the only known disease is that it can kill a vampire. Sangi deboliza is extremely rare and its origin is unknown. So the chances of someone being able to inflict this disease on a vampire would be extremely difficult. Now, porphyric hemophilia is a bacterial disease that humans can be affected by, an infection that is not cured and will lead to vampirism. Now, sag deboliza is a potentially deadly rare disease that only vampires can catch. Now, this condition, caused by a bacterial strain, which is porphyric hemophilia, caused by a bacterial strain carried in the blood and saliva of every vampire. A human comes in contact with the blood or saliva of a vampire can easily become exposed to this bacteria. Once exposed, an infected human only has about 72 hours to begin the antibiotic treatments before the bacteria becomes incurable. In essence, this vampire disease spreads to the human body, changing the chemistry of the blood and skin. The first symptoms of infection may include photosensitivity or photodermatitis, which is sensitivity to light of the eyes or skin. Muscle weakness or seizures can occur, as well as inconsistencies in the nervous system, such as slow or rapid heartbeat. Eventually, the bacteria behind this disease settles into the body and lives there, creating a perfect environment for it to exist in. At this point, the human body has been completely transformed with the curses, but not the benefits of vampirism. In order to gain immortality, strength, and speed, one must still drink the blood of a vampire. This takes us to the next section of vampire feeding. Though the topic of vampire feeding seems pretty straightforward, there are always a few questions when it comes to these specifics. As most people know, a vampire drink blood. The blood of live humans is always preferred, but animal blood would also do the trick. Any warm-blooded mammal can supply the necessary blood for survival. In extreme situations, cold-blooded creatures like snakes and other reptiles may suffice. These, though their blood is less effective. Many vampire myths insinuate that the vampire's heart does not beat. This is not true. Just like humans, vampires' heart beat in order to move the blood through the body. This is why staking a vampire through the heart is a very effective way of killing it. Unlike humans, vampires do not eat for a substance. In our bodies, food is digested and transformed into energy. Since vampires do not have active digestive systems, blood is ingested and absorbed directly through the bloodstream. Flesh blood is necessary for vampire survival. It is a blood that allows them to regenerate blood, any wounds they might acquire, and to sustain live flesh. Since vampires are essentially dead, their bodies naturally decay. Fresh blood moving through the body allows their flesh to stay alive. Most vampires only need to feed a couple of times a week in order to maintain health, but a wounded vampire will need to feed more often as required for healing process. As a vampire ages, it requires less blood to maintain normal functionality. The reason behind this is not entirely clear, but likely has to do with the fact that vampires' gifts and special abilities intensify over time as well. Thus, the older the vampire gets, the stronger its power becomes and less mortal its body is. Unless you want to become a vampire or die, there is a good reason to be resistant to a vampire bite. Even if a vampire bites you, you leave. Even if a vampire bites you and leaves you alive, you will still be at high risk for squirting poraphic hypophilia, the vampire disease. If left untreated, this disease will cause a human body to weaken and deteriorate. If the disease is allowed to settle into the organs of the body, the only option left are to either die or become a vampire. Now, here are a few examples from vampires from America and elsewhere, the real lives behind our modern legends. Forgive me for mispronouncing the name, but Peter Plagojewicz. This Serbian villager and accused bloodsucker was exhumed and staked through the heart a few weeks after his death in 1725. In his book, Vampires, Burial, and Death, Folklore, Paul Barber treats Plagojewicz as a European vampire. Because his exhuman closely follows the broader pattern of the superstition, he was the first in his village to die of a sickness, and subsequent local deaths were blamed on his late-night predations. A rather gruesome-sounding autopsy revealed that was considered the telltale signs of vampirism. I did not detect the slightest odor that is otherwise characteristic of the dead, and the body was completely fresh, one witness wrote. The hair and beard has grown on him. The old skin, which was somewhat whitish, had peeled away, and the new, fresh one had emerged under it. Not without astonishment, I saw fresh blood in his mouth. Another guy called Arnold Paoli. In the early 18th century, this rural Serbian broke his neck after a fall from a hay wagon. Like many others before him, he was accused of vampirism and exhumed after a series of deaths in his village. Many of his supposed victims were dug up as well. Austrian military authorities in control of the region investigated the deaths, and the published account was widely circulated. Paoli's case is thus credited with spreading the vampire superstition to Western Europe, where it took hold before reaching the New World. Next, we have Nellie Vaughan, just 19 years old. She was buried in 1889 in West Greenwich, Rhode Island. Today, this so-called vampire is almost as famous as Mercy Brown, whose exhumation was covered by international newspapers. Vaughan Cemetery has frequently been visited, vandalized, and her headstone broken. But in his book, Food for the Dead, folklorist and vampire scholar Michael Bell presents evidence suggesting that Vaughan is a case of mistaken identity, and that her contemporaries never accused or exhumed her. The superstition probably arose in the late half-century or so that may be a result of confusion with Mercy, who died nearby around the similar date and age, and the admittedly creepy epitaph of Vaughan's tombstone, I am writing and watching for you. The next guy we have is Frederick Ransom, a Dartmouth College student from a well-respected family in South Woodstock, Vermont. He died of tuberculosis in 1817 and is an example of an educated person ensnared in the vampire panic usually associated with misinformed farmers. Ransom's father had his body exhumed in the hopes of saving the rest of his family. His heart was burned in the blacksmith's forge. However, it did not prove a remedy, for mother, sister, and 2 brothers died afterwards. Ransom's surviving brother Daniel later wrote, "It has been related to me that there was a tendency in our family to consumption, and that I would die with it before I was 30. Happily, when Daniel Ransom wrote these words, he was more in his 80 years old." The next person we have is Bristow Condon Child. A black man named Bristow Condon and several of his children died of tuberculosis in Rhode Island in the 1800s. The body of one of the children was exhumed, one source wrote, and the vital parts were burned in abeyance, and the dicta of this shallow and disgusting superstition. Though it's not entirely clear whether Condon was African American or American Indian, the case was the first that folklorist Michael Bell has found suggesting that the vampire tradition crossed racial lines. Another person we have is Annie Dennett. She died of consumption at the age of 21 in rural New Hampshire. In September 1810, a traveling Free Will Baptist minister from Vermont named Enoch Hayes placed attendant her exhumation, which her family undertook in an event to save Annie's father, also sick from tuberculosis. Placed diary entry in a curious example of the participation of a respected New England minister in a vampire hunt. He said, "They opened the grave, and it was Solomon's sight indeed. A young brother by the name of Adams examined the spectacle, but found nothing as they supposed they should. There was but little left. There was little left except bones." So, in our next section, we have frequently asked questions about vampires. Do vampires turn to dust when staked? Well, in a word, no. This device, popularized by Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was actually a television convenience devised by Josh Whedon to evade the need to justify a stack of corpses littering the graveyards. Staking actually starts a process likely to end in a pile of fine white ash with some bony remnants. Do crucifixes kill vampires? A wooden crucifix would cause serious superficial burns, and given enough time could prove fatal. But this is a chemical effect, not a religious one. Many vampires are devout Christian, Central European descent, and a crucifix could trigger severe guilt feelings, in some cases self-loathing, but not fatality. Do vampires fear water? Yes. A vampire really is a device waiting to be denotated, and water, even steam, presents a real risk to the vampire. So yes, water vampires do fear. Can vampires fly? Well, only if you get a ticket. Vampires have been shown turning into bats, flying away, even leaping out of windows with a bat flight soundtrack to suggest a flight. It's all nothing. An exhausted vampire could not fly across Los Angeles and look fresh afterwards. Vampires can probably store energy better than normal folk, but a vertical leap or rapid escape from pursuit might suggest flight, but it's not. Are vampires evil? Not necessarily. Vampires just are, as a lion is not evil when it kills a zebra, so a vampire is not evil for feeding off a person. Living creatures do what they must do to survive. However, that for the most part, vampires are not very nice. However, like the fox killing all the chickens in the hen house, rather just than one vampire, some vampires are particularly unpleasant. As they have intelligence, those who choose such a lifestyle are probably evil, just as some human beings are evil. Have vampires evolved? Well, vampires, as we know them, have been recorded since the 1400s, but almost certainly have been around pretty much unchanged for decades. Given the unique nature of their lifestyle and physique, it would be logical to assume that if they had survived this long, they may have evolved in order to survive. Long-lived creatures are doomed to evolve more slowly, whatever the pressures on them. A longer life means fewer generations, slower reproduction, and so fewer opportunities for evolutionary change. Hold on one second here. Evolutionary changes could be counted in the thousands of years rather than decades or even centuries, but the nature of viruses and the nature of vampires may have allowed for some crossover. Vampire legends consistently link vampires to the natural world. Bats, wolves, and crows all have been associated, and though most of such tales were pure tosh or pure Hollywood, we do not have any deep knowledge of the more distinct past. Now, are there vampire communities? Vampires tend to live alone or in small communities, sometimes referred to as covens. Vampires who allow their community to grow large risk discovery and destruction. Individuals in small groups might get forages, especially in isolated communities. The act of vampirification creates a potential competitor as well as the a blood relative, excuse me. A community that can support one's vampire appetites may not be able to support two from instability mobs, riots, and flaming torches of burn. Um, we're going to take our first break right now, and when we get back from our break, we will discuss werewolves. Welcome back to Beyond the Grave Radio with Haunted Salem, where the dead educate the living, here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. In case you're just joining us, I am your host, Christina Corsetti, and tonight we're discussing vampires, werewolves, and zombies. This section, we're going to be discussing werewolves. So in the last century, several werewolf sightings have been recorded. Many of them have been taking place in Wisconsin, where the origins of werewolves are believed to have begun. As myth's greatest monsters are able to do, the werewolf legend has spread across borders. even across seas and oceans. Vicious animal attacks have been reported for centuries, yet during the day no one can find a trace of the creature responsible. Those who study mythology have long known for the creature have the power, speed, and mindless slaughtering the way the werewolf does. Before we delve into the details of their fearsome and powerful creatures, it is important that we first clear up the confusion about what a werewolf actually is. There is a bit of disagreement among mythologists as to what really constitutes a werewolf. I'll break it down into three distinct creatures that there are known by this name. First, we have the shapeshifter wolf. Fans of the Twilight series will recognize this type of werewolf. Like the character Jacob Black and certain other members of the tribe, the shapeshifter wolf has the ability to change form at any time. This is believed to have been the original power of the first werewolf before it was taken away. Now, the shift shaper wolf can transform from human form to wolf form at will. Though aggressive energy or anger may increase the likelihood of causing its unintentional transformation, the shapeshifter wolf considers werewolves can only change from human to wolf form through pure shapeshifters. From all shapeshifters were born into this ability. The one cannot be transformed into a shapeshifter by the bite of the creature. The exception of this is the Navajo skinwalker, which is a not true shapeshifter, but a witch using an animal hide to transform. The next one we have is the Wolfman. Many werewolf stories include sightings of the legendary Bray Road beast, described a creature that is physically a combination of a wolf and a man. This mutant wolfman typically has the mostly human-shaped body, stands on two legs, but is covered in wolf hair and has claws and fangs. The wolfman is often called a werewolf because in many legends this creature is believed to share many of the traits of the werewolf curse. Others are in their dual human-wolf form at all times, depending upon the legend. I believe the generally accepted theory is that one begins by transforming from human to werewolf on a full moon only. Then over time, it increases to every night, and eventually the body settles into a pure wolfman form at all times. The degree to which a wolfman can control his mind and emotions also degrades as these transformations become more permanent. The last one is the true werewolf. A true werewolf, according to most legends, is a human being that uncontrollably transforms into a wolf during a full moon. Now, the original werewolf curse transformed a shapeshifter wolf into a werewolf, effectively taking away the ability to control the shift, but also taking away the ability to think as a human while in wolf form. Werewolves, when in wolf form, have uncontrollable rage and hunger. They are driven to kill everyone and everything they encounter, regardless of the relationship as humans. The curse causes these wolves to lose all control of their minds, and when they wake up in human form in the morning, they don't remember anything, though they may revisit certain memories in the dreams. It is this form of werewolf that can transform their condition through a bite, assuming, of course, that the human being bitten survives the attack. Now, there are a few different ways to become a werewolf. Becoming a werewolf, though, is a decision that must be thought out well ahead of time, at all possible, but some methods of becoming a werewolf are more dangerous than others, and life after transformation may not be what you expect. There are three ways to become a werewolf. 1. Being born to parents with werewolf genetics. 2. Being bitten by a werewolf. And 3. Being cursed. What people may think today as a werewolf is actually a shapeshifter. Some shapeshifters turn exclusively into wolves from human form, but these are not actual werewolves. These shapeshifter wolves have become popularly known as werewolves because of the Twilight book series. If it's this kind of creature you want to become, I'm afraid you're probably out of luck. Most shapeshifters, wolves included, are born that way genetically. You either have it or you don't, and most of us don't. A bite from a shapeshifter won't make you a shapeshifter, it will just be a bite. There is a single exception, though. Navajo mythology discusses as being known as a skinwalker, who in most cases is a human who has learned how to magically transform themselves into an animal by wearing the animal's skin. A skinwalker are typically considered to be evil and becoming one takes a great deal of sacrifice and a deep knowledge of ancient mystical arts. Where real werewolfism is a curse. Those affected have little to no control over their actions when in wolf form and little to no control over their transformations. Of course, there is an exception to this rule as well in rare cases of human werewolf syndrome, wherein werewolves in wolf form maintain their human consciousness. This rare condition is believed, though, to occur in cases where a werewolf child is born to werewolf parents. Now, in order to be born with a genetic ability to become a werewolf, known formally as genetic lycanthropy, both parents have to have the werewolf gene to pass on to their child, though neither parent necessarily has to be a werewolf themselves. Those born with genetic lycanthropy are not werewolves right out of the womb. A human with a genetic structure will not begin the werewolf transformation until sometime in late puberty. This can be greatly beneficial to the child, as it is better chance of survival in society in its human form. Of course, if the human doesn't know they will become a werewolf, this can understandably come as quick as the shock. When genetic werewolves begin to transform, they do so in a very similar way to bitten werewolves or cursed werewolves. They begin as more man beasts, then over time reach the pure form wolf after transformation. A human that was born without genetic lycanthropy, werewolfism, isn't yet out of the werewolf game. There are still two other ways to become a werewolf, the most common being, though, a werewolf bite. Much like vampires, werewolves carry a bacteria in their bodies that is toxic to humans. It is this bacteria that can cause the human body to be capable of werewolf transformation. Unlike vampires, werewolves don't carry a significant amount of this bacteria in their bloodstream, at least not the strains that can affect a human. Werewolves almost exclusively carry the infectious bacteria in their saliva. Thus, when a human is bitten by a werewolf, there is a good chance that the saliva will enter the human bloodstream where the bacteria can do its work. If you are bitten and don't want to become a werewolf, it is best to begin an antibiotic treatment as soon as possible. Success rates are not great with antibiotics, but they are the only known way to possibly kill the bacteria. Following a bite, the bacteria strain will begin duplicating itself immediately in the human bloodstream. The process takes roughly 6 to 9 weeks to fully integrate the human cells. During this time, the human may experience insomnia, headaches, and flu-like symptoms, but will not show any external signs of werewolfism. Once the bacteria has fully integrated within the cells, the humans will become a werewolf, and as such will experience transformation every night from that point forward. Of the 3 ways to become a werewolf, the curse is by far the most rare. In fact, we know very little about it rather than it does exist. The first werewolf was created by this curse, so we know the original deity that created the curse has the abilities to give it to others. Some later tribal legends suggest that the original werewolf, here we go again, Machachu, was able to bestow his curse onto others, and though it is clear that he did so without biting people, it is not totally clear if he could cast the werewolf curse onto them directly. There are myths of black magic spells to transform people into werewolves. You probably already know how to kill a werewolf, even if you don't realize it. Unlike vampires, werewolves don't have specific methods that need to be used to kill them. That doesn't mean it's an easy task either. Werewolves can be killed through a various number of methods, much like humans. Getting hit by a car, falling from a high elevation, or bleeding to death will all work just as well on a werewolf as they would on a human being. The challenge is not really figuring out how to kill the werewolf, it's figuring out if you're going to be able to kill that werewolf before it kills you. The myth that werewolves will die from a silver bullet to the heart is no myth at all. It's entirely true. If you're a good shot and have bullets made of pure silver on hand, then you should have the easiest time of anyone killing a werewolf. The introduction of silver to the heart will stop it from beating immediately. The bullet doesn't even have to do actual damage. Actually, it doesn't even really have to be a bullet. The reason the silver bullet became legendary is because it is by far the easiest method of getting pure silver to reach that werewolf's heart. So other methods of getting silver to the werewolf's heart um, would work just as well. They are just harder to pull off. Unless a werewolf voluntarily allows you to perform open heart surgery on it with a silver scalpel, you probably ain't going to have a hard time getting to that to work in that method. A variation on the bullet to heart method could be finding a way to introduce small pieces of silver shrapnel into the bloodstream. This only works if they're able to move through the bloodstream and reach the heart. Once at the heart, the smallest bit of silver will cause the heart to immediately stop beating. If the silver lodges itself into the heart, your job is done. Let's say you find yourself in a situation where you want to kill a werewolf, but you don't have any silver bullets on you. Don't be embarrassed. It happens to us all the time. In this instance, a regular gun with regular bullets may be able to do the trick. It's not going to be easy, as using a silver bullet, even a direct shot to the chest, may not be enough to stop a werewolf, but it's better than nothing. Now, if you're going to try to use a gun against a werewolf, keep a few things in mind. First, distance is your friend. Don't think that just because you were able to get your hands on a high-powered shotgun or even assault rifle that this game is going to be, easy. Overconfidence is the number one killer when it comes to battling monsters. If you are standing and facing a rushing werewolf, unload all the ammo you can into it. Don't stop until you sprayed it with enough bullets to kill it at least twice. That might not even be enough. Werewolves are notorious for being able to ridiculous amounts of abuse. Their muscles are much stronger than ours, and their blood clots faster with a wound. They are built to last. You are not. Snipers could have particularly good chance against werewolves. If you can get the drop on one, aim for the head. If you can sever the connection between the spinal cord and the brain, you're going to have an easy time. If not, just make sure that you're in a position that the werewolf cannot reach. Do not climb a tree and snipe from there. Werewolves are excellent tree climbers. Now, sharp objects such as knives, machetes, even swords are effective against werewolves, but most of the time operating them requires close combat, which leaves a human at significant disadvantage against a werewolf. I can see a skilled swordsman who is quick and precise with a sharp, strong blade having success against the werewolf, but for average person, this is just not a good way to get the job done. If you are somehow able to tie or chain up a werewolf, this is probably a better method of killing than using a gun. While a werewolf could stand a barrage of bullets, it won't last long without its limbs or its head. Although you can chain up a werewolf, you probably don't need my advice, seeing as you're either a genius or superhuman. But sharp objects at a distance can be effective. For example, a bow and arrow or a spear thrown off a building would work, but you'd still likely just anger it, not kill it. The real way to kill a werewolf with a blunt object can be understood with a simple physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. This means the heavier an object is multiplied by the faster the object is moving equals the greater likelihood of a dead wolf person. Force equals mass times acceleration. It may be a cliche, but if you can drop a suspended piano from a building, you're probably generating just the right amount of force to kill that werewolf. Ditto, rolling a boulder off a cliff. Chances are you're not going to be such a lucky person, nor the werewolf is going to stand by while this happens. So alternative ways of combining mass and acceleration are probably necessary. Now, enter the truck. If needed, be a monster truck. See the irony in that, but it should be, a sturdy truck, a hefty American truck driven by a Texan would be preferred method. Hit the gas and aim for the werewolf, and you likely got yourself a kill. Keep in mind, though, that werewolves are fast creatures and quite heavenly themselves, hitting one could seriously damage your vehicle, and missing one could mean that it ends up hitching a free ride in the back. The upside, though, is that you are not only going to have a metal suit of armor surrounding you, but being inside a vehicle also makes escape much, much easier. Now, we do have some werewolf facts in questions here. Here's that word again. Lycanthropic disorder is a mental condition in which the subject believes that he or she is a werewolf. The subject does not actually change shape, but is nevertheless capable of being as dangerous as an actual werewolf. Most cases of supposed werewolfry are really the works of lycanthropic disorder victims. Excuse me for that. I am having a tongue twister of a night, and these words are just horrendous. Man to beast. In real werewolves, a physical change to wolf form does occur. The change can be voluntarily, at will, or can be forced by certain cycles of the moon and certain sounds, such as howling. Werewolf and immortality. Werewolves are immune from aging and from most physical diseases due to the constant regeneration of their physical tissue. They can, therefore, be virtually immortal. However, they can be killed by any wound that destroys the heart or the brain, or any form of death that causes brain or heart damage, such as hanging or other oxygen deprivation methods. The mind of a werewolf. Well, though primarily a true wolf while in wolf form, there is some proof that the werewolf retains enough knowledge to assist his killing. Recognition of victims, evasion of traps, and human cunning have all been seen on werewolf cases. Becoming a werewolf? Well, there are several ways to become a werewolf. They include being given the power of shape-shifting through sorcery, being cursed by someone who has been wronged in some way, being bitten by a werewolf, and being born into a werewolf. In each case, the blood becomes tainted or cursed. Damnation. A person who becomes a werewolf against his will, birth, curse, or bite, is not completely damned until he tastes a human blood. Once he does, his soul is eternally damned, and nothing may redeem him. Even without tasting of human blood, however, as long as it taints lays upon the immortal soul, it cannot enter heaven and will remain chained to the mortal plane upon death. Werewolf packs. Like real werewolves, werewolves can live anywhere for many years, yet the instinct for a pact often leads them away from their secretive lifestyle into revealing their nature to a priest or close associate, or converting another to werewolfry for companionship. This is when the otherwise gagey werewolf opens himself to detection. Werewolf packs cause immense destruction. A pack consists of one werewolf who became a werewolf through sorcery, birth, or curse. In other words, his is the original tainted blood. This werewolf is called the alpha werewolf. The remaining werewolves in the pack are called beta werewolves because they become werewolves through the bite of the alpha and carry the alpha's tainted blood. Alpha and beta werewolves. The relationship between the alpha and beta werewolf is a complex one. Once a subject is bitten by a werewolf, his or her life and death are doomed to the werewolf curse. The victim does, however, have some hope. As long as they themselves do not taste the human blood, the curse is reversible. If the alpha werewolf is killed through some action of the beta's curse is broken. It is important to note that whether the beta werewolf was bitten by the alpha werewolf himself or by another beta, it is the alpha who must be destroyed, the source of the original tainted blood. It is also an interesting note that since betas and alphas share common blood, an alpha cannot physically harm a beta on his own bloodline by his own hands without inflicting the same injury upon himself. However, if a beta is harmed or killed by another, it does not affect the alpha. Now, symptoms of werewolfry. When hunting for a werewolf, it is important to remember that your biggest clues will come through your suspects' personalities. Becoming a werewolf is not transparent, no matter how the victim tries to hide it. The tainted subhuman blood greatly alters the subject's own mind and personality, even physical appearance. Therefore, look for symptoms in your human suspects that include increasing violence, increasing aggression, unprovoked rages, insomnia, restlessness, and other bizarre behavior. Unfortunately, over time, these symptoms can be brought under control, so you do not rely on them exclusively. A good example of this comes from the case reported by the Ancient Priesthood Society, Minas del Sol, Brazil, a rash of werewolf killings that was tracked to a high-ranking officer in the army. The society became aware of the man mainly through rumors of his violent behavior and changed personality. The case was successfully resolved with the man's capture. You guys would have to Google that and look that up. So now we're going to be going on our second break. And when we come back, we'll be discussing zombies.
All right, so we're having some technical issues here with the internet connection. We will see if we can reconnect. We'll try again. In the meantime, I'll see if I could load up Eclipse somehow here and try and um, reconnect with Christina Corsetti, Haunted Salem, and finish this final segment on zombies. So you can just stay patient. Hopefully, we'll get her back sooner rather than later.
The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable.
That ends this episode of Beyond the Grave Radio with Haunted Salem, where the dead educate the living. Thank you for listening to what the dead had to say. All the stories mentioned are true, and if interested in more, visit us at mysteriesofhauntedsalem.com. All right. Hi, everybody. Just having a little computer difficulties. I apologize about that. So I will start over. This is Beyond the Grave Radio with Haunted Salem. We are on the Paranormal King Radio Network, and we are discussing vampires, werewolves, and zombies. We are on the zombie section. Nobody claims to have seen zombies shuffling through the woods or has been investigating, checking out zombie tracks from the alleged attack the night before. But these mindless flesh eaters hold another unique position in the monster world. Whenever the story features zombies, it's almost always in an apocalyptic context. Like vampires and werewolves, humans can become zombies from a transfer of bodily fluids. But unlike vampires and werewolves, few people actually think it would be cool to be turned into a zombie. At least the other two monsters at least appear to be somewhat human, but zombies are essentially mindless freaks whose very existence signifies the potential end of the humanity at large. So, a zombie apocalypse is largely considered a type of plague, which is why many modern storytellers choose the incursion of the biological virus to introduce this plague into the popularity. This isn't necessarily true for the reanimated types, though. Those brought back from the dead with their rotting flesh and lumbering gait can be pulled from a cemetery for a night to terrorize the local community before heading back underground. In addition, the original zombie actually comes from Haitian voodoo folklore, where the afflicted individuals were not dead at all, but rather possessed by sorcery. These key differences between varied mythologies make it difficult to find a single truth to follow. Though it is difficult to come up with a single definition of what makes a proper zombie, there are enough common between the core mythologies to fashion a fairly simple description. First things first, zombies don't think for themselves. Whether they are consumed by rage, a mind controlling disease, or magic spell, or are simply too dead to reason anymore, a proper zombie cannot think for itself. This is what makes them so scary. There is no reasoning with them, no cure for their infection. They don't get tired. They don't stop coming at you no matter what. Some, particularly more modern zombies, writers have tried to change things up by creating zombies that reason, strategize, and even lead others. Secondly, a zombie only real instinct is to feed off living flesh. At this point, we have to separate out of the Haitian zombie, as these are essentially peoples whose minds are being controlled by a living person. A zombie, whether the living dead type or the disease induced rage type, wants only to kill and to feed, and likely a Scooby food critic only wants the freshest ingredients. At this point, it seems fair to able to split the remaining zombies into two categories, the fast ones and the slow ones. You start with the human being. The human being is affected with a virus that causes them to lose control. They become mindless, rage filled death machines looking only to kill and feed. They are not unlike a transformed werewolf in this way. The fast zombie is essentially like a diseased PCP addict on a rampage, except they seek out normal people to devour for food. The hunger is what drives them. As with any virus, it looks to spread. Essentially, the virus overtakes the human mind and begins controlling it, driving the infected to spread this virus through saliva and blood transmission. Unlike werewolves or vampires, the bite of a zombie is dangerous, and in that it contains a virus rather than a bacteria. The virus takes over the victim's mind, and his primary concern is the spread. This is why zombies do not attack one another. There is no need to infect someone who is already infected. The virus is smart. It knows this already. So the zombie looks to bite or to spit blood or saliva on the victim. Both the blood and the saliva of a zombie are teeming with the virus. The animal part of the creature looks to feed, and it so often tries to eat its victim, which displeases the virus. But what can it do? A feeding zombie lives to infect again another day. The virus is impatient that it understands. Slow zombies are essentially the living dead or walking dead. They are the reanimated bodies of dead people, and their goal is primarily to feed off living flesh. The idea here is that their bodies are dead and rotting away, and the only way to keep them alive is by consuming living flesh. Think of it like a living person can cut himself and have the wound heal over time. Our bodies are constantly regenerating new cells to replace dead or damaged cells. So it makes sense that zombies would seek this regenerative flesh and at least particularly restore dead cells in their own bodies. The slow ones, in particular, seem to favor brains, possibly because the human brain is significantly reanimated happens in two primary ways. Like fast zombies, a human can become infected. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I thought I just had another technical difficulty, but we did not. Basically, like fast zombies, okay, a human can become infected through the transmission of a virus through an exchange bodily born as a zombie. They are truly just dead people walking around and looking for living flesh to feed. Type of zombie also seems to reconnect with the original Haitian zombie, where the creatures can be controlled through some form of black magic. The only real difference between this type of slow zombies and the Haitian zombies is that the slow zombie is indeed dead, while the Haitian zombie may still be a living person. Now, why do zombies like eating brains and guts? Beating heart zombies must feed for energy. These zombies always feel bad, but ironically are a subset of zombies that are the most advantaged. It is not a good feeling to be beaten heart zombie. Brains and intestines have high concentrations of serotonin. Serotonin is sometimes called the happiness hormone. So essentially, a high functioning zombie is trying to self medicate. Feeding on your brains or intestines may make it feel better. That is why a higher functioning zombie may utter, "I want to eat your brain." As higher functions are lost, these zombies just want to feed, so you're more likely to take a chunk of your arm or leg, whatever is easier to feed on. Can a zombie infect animals? No, it is a species specific virus. A beating heart zombie might eat a live animal. Zombies cannot transmit the virus to another species. Why don't zombies eat each other? Occasionally they do, but there is not a reproductive advantage for the virus in biting another zombie. Only beating heart zombies feed on other beating heart zombies. This usually occurs as a horde attack. Typically, it will be a high functioning zombie with lower viral load that is eaten. But in situations where there is little other food to go on, beating heart zombies all need food, but are predisposed to biting living humans, so they may naturally feed on them as well. What is the lifespan of a zombie? Well, a beating heart zombie can live for years. It is the heart stops. A beating heart zombie becomes an anastole zombie and reanimates shortly after cardiac arrest. A Stoli zombie's average lifespan is about 18 months. It can be undead for up to 3 years. In low humidity environments, it can potentially double the undead span. Now, I'm sure you can hear my dog in the background. She wants to be let out. If you can hold on 1 second. Come on, Sadie. She's a funny character. She was growling at the door. But anyway, what freezing kill a zombie? No, it will reanimate after thawing. Yes, it will convert a heart-beating zombie to an Stoli zombie. It can freeze, and when it unfreezes, it's still a zombie. What is the best way to kill a zombie? The 3 ways to kill a zombie are headshot, headshot, and headshot. Headshots will destroy uh, the nanotubular network in the brain. The cerebellum and brainstem stops functioning and the undead becomes re-dead. The viral particles may remain viable for weeks in the corpse, but it cannot reanimate the corpse. So the best way to kill a zombie is chop its head off, stab it in the head, anything to do with the brain. Kill the brain. Will you become a zombie if you eat zombie flesh? If you're eating zombie flesh, you are undoubtedly a zombie that does not understand that you are undead. On the offhand, chances you are not a zombie when you are definitely off your medicines and you need to call your shrink straight away. Why do zombies drool? The virus stimulates the growth of the salivary glands. Zombies' saliva is infected with the ZA virus. It has the highest concentration of viral particles. This is how the virus transmits itself through bites. And basically, that is our end of our show with vampires, werewolves, and zombies. I wanted to thank Ross Raposo, and I wanted to thank the Paranormal King Radio Network for having us on. I do apologize not being so much in chat this time. It is hard to do a show by yourself and be in chat. But I will absolutely find some help, and I will take care of that. So I want to thank everyone. I want everyone to have a great night, and I will see you next week. That ends this episode of Beyond the Grave Radio with Haunted Salem, where the dead educate the living. Thank you for listening to what the dead had to say. All the stories mentioned are true, and if interested in more, visit us at mysteriesofhauntedsalem.com.